The year was 2847, and Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHSV Retribution, staring at the endless darkness of space. The Dreadnought hummed beneath his feet, a massive ship built with human hands and human determination. For 30 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council, but they were still treated like children among ancient civilizations. Jake ran his hand through his short brown hair and checked the display screens around him. The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Lieutenant Danny Price monitored tactical sensors on his left. Commander Frank Hughes checked weapon systems on his right. Chief Engineer Lisa Grant's voice crackled through the communication system from the engine room below. "Captain, all systems are running smooth. We're ready for whatever comes our way," Lisa said with confidence. Jake nodded even though she couldn't see him. Lisa was the best engineer in the fleet. If she said the ship was ready, then it was ready. He trusted his crew completely. They had trained together for 2 years preparing for this moment. Dr. Karen Walsh entered the bridge carrying a data tablet. Her medical bay was prepared for any emergency. She looked worried, and Jake understood why. The news from the Galactic Council had been troubling. The Valdrin Empire had sent an ultimatum 3 days ago. They wanted humanity to give up control of Kepler Station, a mining facility in the outer reaches of human territory. The station produced rare minerals that powered faster than light engines. Without it, humanity's expansion into space would stop completely. The Valdrin Empire was not a single species. It was a coalition of 7 different alien races who had joined together under military rule. For 500 years, they had expanded their territory by threatening and destroying anyone who stood in their way. Dozens of civilizations had fallen to their fleets. Admiral Claire Bennett had refused to surrender. She was the commander of Earth's deep space fleet, a woman who had spent 40 years protecting humanity's interests. When the Galactic Council urged Earth to comply with the Valdrin demands, she had sent a simple message back: humanity does not bow to threats. Now Jake and his crew were ordered to take the Retribution to the edge of Valdrin space. It was meant to be a show of force, a demonstration that humanity would defend its territory. Jake knew it might also be a suicide mission. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," Danny said from his station. The young lieutenant had excellent instincts for space combat, even though he had never seen real battle before today. "Drop us out of faster than light speed," Jake ordered. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." The ship shuddered slightly as it transitioned back to normal space. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the stars ahead of them. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful and quiet. Then the sensors started screaming warnings. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ships," Danny said, his voice rising with alarm. "Make that dozens of ships." "No, hundreds of ships." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "Put it on screen." The view screen changed, and Jake saw something that would have made most commanders turn their ships around and flee. The Valdrin Armada stretched across space like a dark cloud. Hundreds of warships hung in formation, their hulls reflecting the light from a distant star. They were arranged in a perfect crescent shape, a formation the Valdrin had used to crush enemies for centuries. "I count 347 vessels," Danny reported. His hands moved quickly across his console. "Multiple ship classes. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, fighter carriers. Captain, they outgun us by a factor of 300 to 1. Frank whistled low. "That's a lot of angry aliens." Jake studied the enemy fleet carefully. Each Valdrin ship was sleek and deadly, covered in weapons and shield generators. Their technology was ancient and refined, perfected over millennia of warfare. The Retribution was brand new, built with human engineering that other species called primitive and crude. "Open a channel," Jake ordered. A face appeared on the screen, replacing the view of the Armada. Warlord Thexara looked like a nightmare made real. His species had 4 eyes, gray skin covered in scales, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He wore armor decorated with symbols of his victories. "Human vessel, you are trespassing in Valdrin space," the warlord said in perfect English. The translation devices in his throat made his voice sound like grinding metal. "Your presence is an insult to the Empire. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Jake stood straight and looked directly at the alien commander. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Human Space Vessel Retribution. We are in neutral space defending our territorial interests. We will not withdraw." Thexara's 4 eyes widened slightly. "You dare challenge the might of the Valdrin Empire? Your single ship against our Armada? You humans are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." Maybe we're both, Jake said calmly. But we're not leaving. The warlord leaned forward, his face filling the screen. I have destroyed entire planetary fleets. I have burned worlds that refuse to surrender. Your ship will be torn apart and your crew will die screaming in the void. This is your final warning. Jake felt every eye on the bridge turn toward him. This was the moment of truth. He could order a retreat, save his crew, and live to fight another day. But if he retreated now, humanity would forever be seen as weak. The Valdrin would take Kepler Station, and then they would take more. They would never stop taking until humanity had nothing left. He thought about Earth, the blue planet where 13 billion people lived and worked and dreamed of the stars. He thought about the colonies on Mars and Europa and Titan, where families were building new lives. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy where humans were either predators or prey. Negative, Jake said firmly. We hold position. Thexazara's expression changed to something that might have been respect or might have been amusement. So be it, human. You have chosen death. My fleet will advance. You will have 5 minutes to consider your mistake before we open fire. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody on the bridge spoke. Then Lisa's voice came through the communication system again. Captain, I heard everything. Engineering is ready. We'll give you everything this ship has. Danny turned in his chair. Tactical is ready, sir. Frank cracked his knuckles. Weapons are hot and ready to dance. Karen nodded from her position near the medical station. I'll keep everyone alive as long as possible. Jake looked at each of them, feeling pride swell in his chest. They knew the odds. They knew they might all die in the next hour. But not one of them suggested running away. Then let's show these aliens what humans are made of, Jake said. He pressed the ship-wide communications button. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to face an enemy that thinks we're easy prey. They think one human ship can't stand against their armada. Let's prove them wrong. The Retribution's engines flared brighter as Lisa pushed more power through the systems. The weapon ports opened along the hull, revealing the railguns and missile tubes that Frank had lovingly maintained. Danny's fingers danced across his tactical display, calculating firing solutions and evasion patterns. In the distance, the Valdrin armada began to move forward like a wave of death and metal. Jake sat down in the captain's chair and gripped the armrests. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The Valdrin fleet moved through space like a hunting pack, closing in on wounded prey. Their ships maintained perfect formation, centuries of military discipline evident in every movement. On the bridge of the Retribution, Jake watched the enemy advance with cold calculation rather than fear. Distance to enemy fleet? He asked. Danny checked his sensors. 200,000 kilometers in closing. They're maintaining their crescent formation, standard Valdrin tactical approach. They'll try to surround us and hit from all sides at once. Exactly what we expected, Jake said. He opened a channel to engineering. Lisa, how's our power distribution? Reactor is running at 70% capacity, she replied. I'm holding 30% in reserve for when things get ugly. And Captain, things are definitely going to get ugly. Jake allowed himself a small smile. Lisa had worked on the Retribution since its construction began 5 years ago. She knew every wire, every circuit, every system better than anyone alive. If she said she could keep the ship running, then nothing would stop her. Frank turned from his weapons console. Captain, I've got firing solutions locked on their lead ships. Just say the word and I'll light them up. Not yet, Jake said. Let them get closer. I want them to think we're paralyzed with fear. The truth was more complicated. The Retribution was designed on principles that other galactic species had abandoned thousands of years ago. While alien civilizations focused on elegant energy weapons and sophisticated shield matrices, humans had asked a simple question. What if we just hit them really hard with really big bullets? The Dreadnought's primary weapons were railguns, electromagnetic accelerators that fired tungsten projectiles at a fraction of light speed. The concept was ancient, dating back to Earth's 21st century. But humans had perfected the design, scaling it up to sizes that made alien engineers call them insane. 100,000 kilometers, Danny reported. They're charging their plasma cannons. I'm detecting power surges across their fleet. Karen moved to her emergency station. Medical bay is ready for casualties. Emergency teams are standing by on all decks. The Valdrin ships glowed with building energy. Their plasma weapons drew power from antimatter reactors. creating bolts of superheated gas that could melt through armor like butter. They had used these weapons to destroy countless enemies over the centuries. 80,000 kilometers, Danny said. Captain, they're definitely within firing range now. Why aren't they shooting? Jake understood. They're trying to intimidate us. They want us to break formation and run. It makes the hunt more satisfying for them. Frank snorted. They're going to be real disappointed then. 60,000 kilometers, Danny counted down. Captain, I really think we should consider. Fire, Jake said calmly. Frank's hands moved across his console with practiced speed. The Retribution's railgun batteries erupted with devastating force. 24 projectiles, each weighing 2 tons, launched from the ship's hull at incredible velocity. The Valdrin had shields designed to deflect energy weapons. They could absorb laser fire, plasma bolts, and particle beams with ease, but shields worked by deflecting or dispersing energy. They were not designed to stop solid mass moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten projectiles covered 60,000 kilometers in seconds. They hit the leading Valdrin ships before the aliens could react. The impacts were catastrophic. Simple kinetic energy tore through shields, through armor, through the ships themselves. Explosions bloomed across the enemy formation as reactors breached and life support systems failed. Direct hits on 17 targets, Danny reported, his voice filled with shock. Captain, 11 ships are completely destroyed. 6 more are disabled and drifting. On the view screen, the perfect Valdrin crescent formation was already breaking apart, ships scattered in confusion, their commanders unable to understand how primitive kinetic weapons had penetrated their advanced defenses. Reload and fire at will, Jake ordered. Danny, I need you to watch their movements. They'll try to adapt. Already on it, sir, Danny said. His tactical console was linked to an advanced computer system, an artificial intelligence that analyzed enemy behavior and predicted their next moves. The Galactic Council had banned military AI centuries ago, calling it too dangerous. Humans had built one anyway. The AI processed data faster than any organic mind. It studied the Valdrin fleet movements, compared them to thousands of historical battles stored in its memory, and began predicting where the enemy ships would go next. The AI says they'll scatter and try to reform on our flanks, Danny reported. Classic response to a frontal ambush. Then let's not be here when they arrive, Jake said. Helm, execute pattern Delta 7. The Retribution's engines flared with blue-white fusion fire. The massive Dreadnought spun on its axis and accelerated at speeds that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. Human engineers had designed the propulsion system with the same philosophy as the weapons. More power, less elegance, and absolutely no concern for what other species thought was reasonable. The crew felt the G-forces slam into them. Most alien species would have been crushed by the acceleration, but humans had evolved on Earth, a planet with higher gravity than most inhabited worlds. Their bodies could endure punishment that would kill other beings. Jake's vision blurred at the edges, but he kept his eyes on the tactical display. The Retribution carved through space like a blade, repositioning itself before the Valdrin could adjust. Target their command ships, Jake ordered. Frank, load the special packages, Frank grinned. Deploying nuclear surprises. The missiles launched from the Retribution's tubes, dozens of them spreading out across space. They were nuclear weapons, fusion warheads that released massive amounts of energy. Every species in the galaxy had abandoned nuclear weapons centuries ago, considering them too primitive and too inefficient compared to antimatter devices. But humans hadn't built these missiles for their explosive power. They had built them for their electromagnetic pulse. The warheads detonated across the Valdrin formation. The nuclear explosions created massive bursts of electromagnetic radiation that swept through the enemy fleet. Valdrin ships, with their sophisticated computer systems and elegant electronic warfare suites, suddenly went dark. Communications failed. Sensors went offline. Targeting systems crashed. Their fleet is blind, Danny reported with satisfaction. The electromagnetic pulses fried their networks. They're flying on manual systems only. Lisa, give me everything the engines have, Jake called down to engineering. I don't care if it's safe. I care if it works. Aye, Captain, Lisa replied. Pushing reactor to 95%. If we survive this, you owe me a new cooling system. The Retribution accelerated again, diving into the confused mass of Valdrin ships. The Dreadnought's point defense systems came online. Rapid-fire railguns designed to destroy incoming missiles and fighter craft. But Jake was using them against the Valdrin destroyers. raking their hulls with hypersonic projectiles that punched through armor like paper. A Valdran heavy cruiser loomed ahead, 3 times the size of the Retribution. Its captain had managed to restore some systems and was bringing his plasma cannons to bear. The massive weapons glowed with deadly energy. "Evasive," Jake shouted. The Retribution twisted sideways and the plasma bolt passed through the space where they had been seconds before. The superheated gas dissipated harmlessly into the void. Frank locked onto the cruiser and fired the main railguns. The tungsten projectiles hit the enemy ship amidships, tearing through decks and compartments. The cruiser tried to return fire, but Frank was already targeting its weapon emplacements. One by one, the plasma cannons exploded under the railgun barrage. "That's one big angry alien who won't be shooting anymore," Frank said. But there were still hundreds of Valdran ships, and they were beginning to recover from the electromagnetic pulse. Commanders were shouting orders through manual communication systems. Ships were reorienting, bringing their weapons to bear on the lone human dreadnought. Jake knew the next few minutes would determine everything. The Retribution had inflicted serious damage, but the battle was far from over. The Valdran still had overwhelming numbers. They were angry now, and angry enemies made mistakes. "Danny, where's their flagship?" Jake asked. The tactical officer studied his sensors. "The AI has identified it. The largest cruiser in the center of their formation. That's where Warlord Thexazara is commanding from." Jake made his decision. "Plot an intercept course. We're going straight for their leader." Karen looked up from her medical station. "Captain, that's suicide. They'll throw everything they have at us." "Exactly," Jake said. "And while they're focused on us, they're not thinking strategically. They're thinking emotionally. That's when we win." The Retribution turned toward the heart of the Valdran fleet, engines burning bright, weapons ready. Around them, space filled with plasma fire and missile trails. The battle had truly begun, and humanity's fate hung in the balance. The Retribution drove deeper into the Valdran fleet like a spear thrust into the heart of an enemy army. Plasma bolts and antimatter torpedoes filled the space around them, turning the void into a deadly storm of fire and energy. Jake gripped his chair as the ship shook from near misses. "Shields holding at 60%, Danny called out over the sound of alarms. "Multiple impacts on our port side. Hull armor is taking damage but holding." Lisa's voice came through the communication system, strained but determined. "Captain, I'm rerouting power from non-essential systems. You'll have shields and weapons, but don't expect the coffee makers to work." Despite the tension, several crew members laughed. It was a brief moment of humanity in the middle of hell. Jake appreciated Lisa for that. She kept the crew focused by reminding them they were still human, still alive, still fighting. "Targeting their destroyer screen," Frank announced. "These smaller ships are like gnats, annoying gnats with plasma cannons." The Retribution's weapons fired in a continuous barrage. Railgun rounds tore through Valdran destroyers, each impact sending ships spinning out of control or breaking apart completely. The human dreadnought moved with impossible agility for its size, dodging the heaviest fire while returning devastating salvos. In the medical bay, Karen worked frantically as casualties began arriving. The intense maneuvering created G-forces that caused injuries even among the tough human crew. She had 3 assistants helping her, and they moved between patients with practiced efficiency. "Broken arm on deck 7, one assistant called out. "Concussion on deck 12, nothing critical yet." Karen nodded while treating a young ensign who had been thrown against a bulkhead. "Stay ready. The worst is probably still coming." On the bridge, Danny's tactical display showed the battle in real time. The AI processed thousands of data points every second, predicting enemy movements and suggesting optimal firing solutions. The Valdran were trying to surround the Retribution, using their numbers to trap the human ship in a killing box. "They're adapting to our tactics," Danny warned. "The AI shows they're coordinating their fire patterns now. They'll hit us from multiple angles simultaneously." "How long until they're in position?" Jake asked. 2 minutes, maybe less." Jake studied the tactical display. The Valdran flagship was still ahead of them, a massive cruiser that commanded the enemy fleet. If they could reach it, if they could damage or destroy the command ship, the entire enemy formation would fall into chaos. "Lisa, I need emergency speed," Jake said. "Everything you can give me for the next 90 seconds. There was a pause on the other end. Then Lisa replied, "Captain, if I push the reactor that hard, we might have a containment breach." The cooling systems weren't designed for this kind of punishment. "I trust you to keep us alive," Jake said simply. Another pause. "All right. You'll have your speed." Engineering out. The Retribution's engines roared with power beyond their normal capacity. The ship surged forward, accelerating toward the enemy flagship at speeds that made the hull groan with stress. Jake felt himself pressed back into his chair as the G-forces multiplied. Valdrin ships tried to intercept them, but the Retribution was moving too fast now. Frank fired constantly, clearing a path through the enemy formation. Ships exploded or scattered to avoid the human Dreadnought's charge. 30 seconds to flagship range, Danny counted down. 20 seconds. They're launching fighters. Dozens of them. The Valdrin fighter craft were small and fast, designed to swarm larger ships and tear them apart with concentrated fire. They came at the Retribution like a cloud of angry insects, their weapons blazing. "Point defense systems. Engage," Jake ordered. The Retribution's hull bristled with rapid-fire rail guns designed specifically for close-range defense. They opened up on the fighter swarm, filling space with hypersonic projectiles. Valdrin fighters disintegrated by the dozens, unable to withstand even glancing hits from the human weapons, but some got through. Plasma bolts struck the Retribution's shields, weakening them further. An antimatter missile detonated close to the hull, sending a shockwave through the entire ship. Lights flickered on the bridge. "Shields at 30%, Danny reported. "We can't take much more of this." "We don't have to," Jake said. "Frank, prepare the main cannon. Target the flagship's bridge section." The main cannon was the Retribution's most powerful weapon. It ran along the entire length of the ship, a magnetic accelerator designed to fire projectiles at 90% of light speed. The weapon took enormous power to charge and could only fire once every few minutes, but its destructive potential was unmatched. "Charging main cannon," Frank said. "It'll take 40 seconds. Those 40 seconds felt like an eternity. The Valdrin flagship grew larger on the view screen, a massive ship covered in weapons and armor. Warlord Thexazara was broadcasting orders to his fleet, trying to coordinate a response to the human attack. "All ships, focus fire on the human vessel." The Warlord's voice echoed across open channels. "Destroy them now." The Valdrin fleet responded to their commander's order. Plasma fire and missiles converged on the Retribution from every direction. The shields flickered and failed under the massive assault. Hull armor vaporized in some sections. Explosions rippled across the human ship's exterior. "Shields down," Danny shouted. "We're taking direct hits to the hull. Decks 9 through 12 are venting atmosphere. Emergency bulkheads are sealing." In the medical bay, Karen was thrown to the floor as the ship rocked from impacts. Alarms screamed warnings about hull breaches and fires. She pulled herself up and continued working, knowing that people were depending on her. In engineering, Lisa watched temperature gauges climb into the red zone. The reactor was operating far beyond safe parameters. She manually adjusted coolant flow, overriding safety systems that tried to shut everything down. Sweat poured down her face from the intense heat, but her hands never stopped moving across the controls. "Captain, reactor temperature is critical," she said into her communicator. "We need to fire that cannon soon or shut down the charge." "We can't maintain this power level." 20 seconds, Frank announced. Main cannon at 85% charge. The Valdrin flagship fired its own main weapons, massive plasma cannons that could crack a planet's crust. The superheated bolts screamed toward the Retribution. Jake ordered evasive maneuvers, but there was no time. The plasma hit them head-on, the bridge filled with smoke and sparks. Consoles exploded. 2 crew members were thrown across the room. Jake tasted blood in his mouth, but he kept his eyes on the view screen. The flagship was directly ahead now, so close he could see the details of its hull. 10 seconds, Frank said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. 5 seconds. Cannon charged and ready. Fire, Jake ordered. The main cannon unleashed its terrible power. A projectile the size of a small vehicle launched from the Retribution's bow at 90% of light speed. It crossed the distance to the Valdrin flagship in the blink of an eye. The projectile's impact released energy, equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. The Valdrin shields, designed to stop energy weapons, did absolutely nothing against simple mass moving at relativistic velocity. The kinetic energy was so enormous that it didn't just damage the flagship. It tore the massive ship in half. The bridge section separated from the aft section. Both pieces tumbled through space, atmosphere and debris fountaining from the destroyed vessel. Secondary explosions rippled through what remained of the ship as reactors lost containment. Warlord Thexazara's final transmission was a scream of rage and disbelief, cut short as his bridge decompressed into vacuum. For a moment, the entire battle stopped. Every ship, human and alien alike, seemed to pause in shock at what had just happened. The Valdran flagship, the symbol of the Empire's power, was gone, destroyed by a single shot from a human weapon. Then the Valdran fleet panicked. Without their commander, without coordination, the alien ships began to scatter. Some tried to reform and continue fighting. Others broke formation and fled toward the edge of the system. The organized armada dissolved into chaos. "Enemy ships are retreating," Danny said, his voice filled with amazement. "Captain, we did it." "We actually did it." Jake looked at the tactical display. Over 200 Valdran ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were running away, abandoning the battlefield entirely. The Retribution hung in space, battered and smoking, but still intact. "All hands cease fire," Jake ordered. "Damage report." The reports came in from all sections of the ship. There were casualties, but surprisingly few deaths. The hull was damaged but repairable. The reactor was overheating, but Lisa had it under control. The Retribution had survived. Jake leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. His crew looked at him with expressions of relief, pride, and exhaustion. They had faced impossible odds and won. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. The Retribution drifted through the debris field that had once been the Valdran Armada. Broken ships and shattered hulls floated in the darkness, silent monuments to the battle that had just ended. On the bridge, Jake watched the tactical display as the last enemy vessels jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared. "Confirm all enemy ships have left the sector," he said quietly. Danny checked his sensors carefully. "Confirmed, Captain. The remaining Valdran fleet has withdrawn. We're alone out here except for the wreckage." The bridge was a mess. Smoke still hung in the air from damaged consoles. Scorch marks covered several walls. One of the main view screens was cracked but still functional. The crew members who had been thrown during the battle were being helped to their feet by their colleagues. Jake opened communications to all sections of the ship. "This is the captain. The battle is over. We've won. All departments begin emergency repairs and tend to the wounded. Good work, everyone. You saved humanity today." A ragged cheer went up across the ship, crew members celebrating their survival. But Jake knew they couldn't relax yet. The Retribution was damaged and far from home. They needed to make sure the ship could survive the journey back to human space. "Lisa, what's the status of our engines?" he asked. The chief engineer's face appeared on one of the working screens. She looked exhausted, her uniform stained with grease and sweat. Behind her, Jake could see her team working frantically on damaged systems. "The reactor is stable now, but it was a close thing," Lisa reported. "I had to vent excess heat through emergency systems. We lost some coolant, but we have enough to get home. The main engines are functional at about 70% capacity. The faster-than-light drive took some damage, but I can fix it. Give me 6 hours and we'll be ready to travel." "You have 4 hours," Jake said. "I don't want to stay here longer than necessary. The Valdran might come back with reinforcements." Lisa nodded. "We'll make it work. Engineering out." Jake turned to Frank. "Weapons status?" The weapons officer consulted his damaged console. "Main cannon is offline. It needs major repairs that we can't do here. Railgun batteries are at 60% capacity. We expended most of our missiles. Point defense systems are operational. We can defend ourselves if we have to, but I wouldn't want to fight another major battle right now." "Understood," Jake said. "Danny, any signs of incoming ships, Valdran or otherwise?" Danny shook his head. "Sensors are clear. But Captain, I'm picking up communications traffic, a lot of it. Ships from multiple species are broadcasting on all frequencies. They all seem to be talking about us." "Let me hear it," Jake ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with overlapping alien voices. Some spoke in languages the translator couldn't process immediately, but the emotional content was clear. Shock, fear, amazement, and respect. "Did you see that human ship? Impossible. They destroyed the Valdran flagship with one shot. Our intelligence reports were completely wrong about human capabilities. We should reconsider our treaty negotiations with Earth. Jake listened to the chatter with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. The battle had been broadcast across open channels. Every major power in the sector had been watching. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. His communications console beeped with an incoming transmission. The source identifier showed it was from Admiral Claire Bennett back at Earth Command. "Put her through," Jake said. The Admiral's face appeared on screen. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Behind her, Jake could see the operations center at headquarters, filled with staff members working at consoles. "Captain Morrison," she said formally, "I've been receiving reports about the engagement. Some of them seem too incredible to believe." "All reports are accurate, Admiral," Jake replied. "We engaged a Valdran fleet of over 300 ships. We destroyed or disabled approximately 2/3 of their forces. The survivors have withdrawn from the sector. Human territory is secure." Admiral Bennett was quiet for a moment. Jake could see her processing the information, probably looking at data displays he couldn't see. "Casualties?" she asked. 15 wounded, 2 seriously, Jake reported. "No deaths. Dr. Walsh and her team did excellent work. The ship is damaged but repairable. We'll need a full overhaul when we return, but we can make the journey home under our own power." The Admiral nodded slowly. "You understand what you've done, Captain? This changes everything. The Galactic Council has been calling non-stop. Every species wants to know about human military capabilities. Some are congratulating us. Others are demanding explanations. A few are calling for sanctions against Earth." "Are they threatening us?" Jake asked, his voice hardening. "Not directly," Admiral Bennett said. "They're too smart for that after seeing what happened to the Valdran. But we're going to have to navigate some very complicated politics. The Council has requested your presence to testify about the battle." Jake had expected this. "When?" "As soon as you can return to Council space. The session is scheduled for 3 months from now. That should give you enough time to get home and recover. Jake, I need you to understand something. You're not just a military officer anymore. You're a symbol. You've proven that humanity can defend itself against any threat. But symbols can be dangerous. Be careful." "I understand, Admiral," Jake said. The transmission ended. Jake sat in his captain's chair and looked at his crew. They were bruised, exhausted, but alive and victorious. Danny was already working on his tactical reports. Frank was cataloging remaining ammunition. Even the crew members with minor injuries were back at their stations doing their jobs. Karen entered the bridge, her medical uniform stained but her expression professional. "Captain, all wounded are stable. The 2 serious cases will need surgery when we reach proper medical facilities, but they'll survive. I need to talk to you about the crew's psychological state after the battle." Jake stood and walked with her to a quiet corner of the bridge. "Talk to me." "They're running on adrenaline right now," Karen said quietly. "But when that wears off, the reality of what happened will hit them. We were in mortal danger. We could have all died. Some of them are going to have nightmares. Others might have delayed stress reactions. I'll need to monitor everyone closely over the next few weeks." "Do whatever you need to do," Jake said. "The crew's well-being is a priority." Over the next 4 hours, the Retribution slowly came back to life. Lisa's engineering team worked miracles, with damaged systems, patching, repairing, and jury-rigging solutions to problems that should have taken weeks to fix. Damage control teams sealed hull breaches and restored atmosphere to damaged sections. Supply officers took inventory of remaining resources. Jake walked through the ship, visiting different sections and talking to crew members. He thanked them for their service, checked on the wounded, and made sure everyone understood how important their contributions had been. It was something he had learned from Admiral Bennett. A good captain takes care of their people. In the cargo bay, he found a young technician named Pete staring at a damaged bulkhead. The man jumped to attention when he saw Jake. "At ease," Jake said. "What are you thinking about, Pete?" The technician hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I was scared, sir. When we were taking all that fire, when the shields went down, I thought we were all going to die. But we didn't. We're still here." Jake put a hand on the young man's shoulder. Being scared doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. What matters is that you stayed at your post and did your job anyway. That's courage. Pete nodded, looking a bit more confident. Thank you, sir. When Jake returned to the bridge, Lisa's face appeared on the communications screen again. She looked slightly less exhausted now. Captain, I've got good news. The faster-than-light drive is repaired. We can make the jump home whenever you're ready. Jake looked around at his crew. They were ready, tired, battered, but ready. Set course for Earth, he ordered. Take us home. The Retribution's engines ignited, and the massive Dreadnought began moving away from the battlefield. Behind them, the debris field stretched across space, a testament to the day humanity proved it would never be prey. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Jake thought about what Admiral Bennett had said. He was a symbol now. The battle would be studied by military academies across the galaxy. The tactics they had used would be analyzed and copied. The Retribution's name would be remembered, but more importantly, humanity had sent a message to the entire galaxy. We are here, we are strong, and we will not be pushed around. The stars stretched and blurred as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying its crew home to a changed galaxy. 3 months had passed since the battle. The Retribution had returned to Earth orbit for repairs and upgrades. The ship sat in space dock above Luna, surrounded by construction platforms and repair crews. Engineers studied every system, learning from the combat damage and improving designs for future vessels. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, feeling oddly out of place. The massive room was carved from a single asteroid, its walls decorated with symbols representing thousands of member species. Delegates from hundreds of civilizations filled the tiered seating, all of them watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Jake wore his formal uniform, dark blue with silver insignia marking his rank and service medals. He stood at a podium in the center of the chamber, facing the Council's leadership panel. The panel consisted of representatives from the 5 founding species of the Galactic Council. Ambassador Paul Carter sat in the human delegation area, looking calm but alert. He had been Earth's representative to the Council for 10 years, navigating the complex politics of galactic civilization. Before the battle, many Council members had dismissed him. Now they watched him carefully, wondering what other surprises humanity had prepared. The lead counselor, a being from the ancient Corthan species, spoke in a voice that the translation devices rendered as calm but firm. Captain Morrison, you are here to provide testimony regarding the engagement with the Valdrin Empire fleet. The Council has reviewed sensor logs from multiple observers. The footage is quite remarkable. Please describe the events in your own words. Jake took a breath and began speaking. He kept his language simple and direct, describing the Valdrin ultimatum, the decision to hold position, and the subsequent battle. He explained the human tactical doctrine, the weapon systems they had employed, and the reasoning behind each decision. The chamber was completely silent as he spoke. Many delegates had never heard a human military officer speak before. They had assumed humanity was technologically inferior, dependent on Council protection. The battle had shattered that assumption. When Jake finished, the counselor who represented the Nexar Collective stood up. The Nexar were a species of tall, thin beings with multiple limbs. They had a reputation for aggressive diplomacy. Captain Morrison, the Nexar delegate said, his tone sharp, your actions resulted in the deaths of over 70,000 Valdrin personnel. You destroyed ships that represented centuries of construction and development. Some council members believe your response was excessive. How do you justify such violence? Jake met the delegate's gaze directly. The Valdrin Empire threatened human territory with a fleet of over 300 warships. They promised to destroy us if we didn't surrender our sovereign holdings. I protected my species from annihilation. That's not violence, that's survival. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable. Another delegate stood, this one from the Talvin species. But you could have withdrawn and sought diplomatic solutions. The Council could have mediated the dispute. Instead, you chose warfare. With respect, Jake said, the time for diplomacy ended when the Valdrin assembled an invasion fleet. They weren't interested in negotiation. They wanted submission. Humanity doesn't do submission. Ambassador Carter smiled slightly at that response. He had told Jake to be honest during the testimony. The truth was more powerful than any diplomatic doublespeak. The questioning continued for hours. Delegates asked about human weapons technology, tactical training, and strategic planning. Jake answered everything he was authorized to discuss, carefully avoiding classified information about humanity's full military capabilities. Finally, a delegate from the Korthan Collective stood up. The Korthan were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, their civilization dating back thousands of years. They had suffered under Valdran aggression for centuries, losing 3 colony worlds to the Empire's expansion. Captain Morrison, the Korthan delegate said in a gentle voice, "My people have watched the Valdran grow more aggressive with each passing generation. We have asked the Council for protection, for intervention, for justice. We have been told to be patient, to seek diplomatic solutions to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, the Valdran have grown stronger and bolder. Your single ship accomplished what the entire Council failed to do for centuries. You stopped them." The chamber erupted in argument. Species that had good relations with the Valdran protested. Those who had suffered under Valdran expansion applauded. The session dissolved into chaos as delegates shouted over each other. The lead counselor called for order, but it took several minutes before the chamber quieted down. When silence finally returned, the counselor spoke directly to Jake. "Captain, you may return to your delegation while the council debates this matter. We will reconvene tomorrow for a final decision." Jake left the podium and joined Ambassador Carter in the human section. The ambassador leaned close and whispered, "That went better than expected." The Korthan speech was perfect timing. "They carry a lot of influence here. What happens now?" Jake asked quietly. "Politics," Carter said with a tired smile. "Lots of politics." The next day, Jake returned to the Grand Chamber. The room felt different now, charged with tension and anticipation. The lead counselor stood at the central podium holding a data tablet. "This council has debated through the night," the counselor announced. "We have reviewed all evidence, heard all arguments, and considered the implications of this incident. We have reached several conclusions." The counselor paused, looking around the chamber. First, Captain Morrison's actions were justified under the right of self-defense. The Valdran Empire presented a clear and immediate threat to human sovereignty. No sanctions will be imposed on Earth or its military forces. Relief washed over the human delegation, but the counselor wasn't finished. Second, this incident has revealed a significant shift in galactic power dynamics. Humanity possesses military capabilities that rival or exceed many established civilizations. To ignore this reality would be foolish. The counselor looked directly at Ambassador Carter. Therefore, the council proposes that humanity be granted a seat on the Security Directorate, with full voting rights on matters of galactic peace and military intervention. The chamber exploded in reaction. Some species cheered, others protested loudly. The human delegation sat in stunned silence. The Security Directorate was the most powerful body in the galaxy, controlling peacekeeping forces and arbitrating disputes between civilizations. "This is unprecedented," one delegate shouted. "Humans have been council members for only 30 years. They lack the experience and wisdom for such responsibility." The Korthan delegate stood again. "With respect, they have demonstrated exactly the kind of decisive action that the Directorate has lacked. I support this proposal." The vote took place immediately. The motion passed by a narrow margin. Ambassador Carter stood and formally accepted the appointment on behalf of Earth. The political landscape of the galaxy had just shifted fundamentally. After the session ended, Jake found himself surrounded by other delegates wanting to speak with him. Some offered congratulations. Others asked about human technology and training programs. A few made subtle inquiries about military alliances. Admiral Claire Bennett appeared through the crowd, having traveled to Council space specifically for the proceedings. She pulled Jake aside to a quieter area. "Congratulations, Captain," she said. "You're a hero back home. The media can't get enough of you. There are already 3 documentaries being produced about the battle." Jake grimaced. "I didn't do this for fame, Admiral." "I know," Bennett said. "But fame comes with the territory now. Speaking of territory, I have orders for you. The Retribution is being upgraded with new systems based on lessons learned from the battle. When it's ready, you'll take her back out to the frontier. We need experienced captains patrolling our borders." "What about the Security Directorate appointment?" Jake asked. Will Earth actually have influence, or is this just ceremonial? Bennett's expression turned serious. I've been appointed as Earth's representative to the Directorate. I'll be handling the political side. Your job is to keep doing what you do best, protecting human interests and showing the galaxy that we're not to be underestimated. Over the following weeks, Jake returned to Earth for a brief leave. He visited his family in Colorado, seeing his parents and younger sister for the first time in 2 years. They treated him like he was made of glass, worried that he had been traumatized by the battle. But Jake felt fine. He had done his duty, protected his crew, and secured humanity's place among the stars. That was enough. Back at the shipyard, he watched as the Retribution underwent its transformation. New armor plating covered the damaged sections. Upgraded weapon systems replaced the ones destroyed in battle. Additional crew quarters were added to accommodate a larger complement of personnel. Lisa oversaw much of the work, arguing with contractors and pushing for improvements. Frank was there too, personally testing each weapon system to ensure it met his standards. Danny spent his time training new tactical officers, sharing the lessons he had learned during the battle. Dr. Karen continued her work with the crew, helping them process their experiences. She had published a paper on combat stress management